We're ready.
People of Armageddon.
Soldiers of the Imperial Guard. For decades, we have defended this world. Some of you were born here and know only war. Some of you have grown old upon these battlefields. Some of you were brought from off-world, shipped here to die.
I thank every one of you. But look at what's become of our world.
Graveyards that reach from horizon to horizon. Cities cloaked in ash and dust. All
Industry in ruin. The next wave of greenskins will soon reach our world.
They come in numbers the likes of which we've never seen. We're expected to die in duty. To hold the line.
We cannot.
There is no victory to be had here. I cannot ask you to die
In the mud of a world that was lost long ago. Flee, all of you.
Flee. Make for the evacuation transports.
Get off world if you are able. Run for your life. There will be no evacuation.
There will be no cowardice. There will be no defeat. This is our city. This is our world. Soldiers of Armageddon!
Make ready.
Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant. Now, to mark the beginning of the 11th edition of Warhammer 40,000, I present the first half of the edition lore update, Operation Imperator. Alas, a few glitches, including the heat, prevented me from doing the lot in one go, so watch out for a supplemental drop before next Friday. Also, we have now started putting our back catalogue up on other platforms, so go have a shifty or a look in the video description to links to those options and other opportunities for savings or patron links. Now, I hope you enjoy this rendition while you hobby or learn the new rules. To quote, Warhammer 40,000, Operation Imperator. Armageddon. Armageddon has borne the brunt of brutal invasions. Its defenders have bled and died in their billions to preserve this bastion of Imperial might from the grasping talons of the alien and the heretic. One foe stands above all others as the planet's nemesis, one of limitless brutality, cunning, and grand plans, who seeks to crush the galaxy beneath his iron tread. Ghazkhull Mag Uruk Thrakka. Twice has the Grand Warlord led invasions of Armageddon, and twice has he been repelled at horrific cost. Yet the Orcs' hunger for conquest is greater than ever. Now, at the head of the largest war the galaxy has ever known, Ghazkhull once more turns his gimlet gaze upon the object of his ambition. This time, he will not be denied. As Ghazkhull's hordes descend in their teeming millions, Armageddon's exhausted soldiers and the beleaguered citizens of its besieged hives once more occupy battlements and defensive lines. These outmatched defenders cling to their faith in the God Emperor, denying the incontrovertible truth they face. Armageddon has fallen. The Armageddon Sector. The invasion of the Armageddon Sector came swiftly and with overwhelming force. Coruscating flares of emerald lightning filled the skies above targeted worlds. and Xenos fleets appeared in low orbit as if from nowhere. In reality, they had been flung across the vastness of space by the latest Ork advances in teleportation technology. Astropathic cries for reinforcements echoed throughout the void, alerting Imperial forces to the emergent threat. Alongside the commanders receiving these desperate entreaties was Marneus Calgar, chapter master of the Ultramarines. Having withdrawn from the fighting in the Bastion subsector, Calgar was confronted with a second assault on the Segmentum Solar. He coordinated with the commanders of Battle Group Zexarian of Indomitus Crusade Fleet Sextus, marshalling the defense of the Armageddon subsector. He developed an intricate plan of overlapping offensives and staged reinforcement that would begin with the deployment of elements of Battle Group Zexarian to crucial worlds such as Semtexia and Basket. Armageddon was the most crucial of all the linchpin worlds in the region, not only for its material resources and industrial production capabilities, but also for its symbolic importance. Should the Hive world remain in Ork hands, the effect on the morale of the wider Armageddon subsector's defenders would indeed be devastating. Surveying the intelligence reports seeping out of Armageddon's system, Calgar saw that only the Adeptus Astartes could break the siege. Only they could deploy troops to the planet's surface swiftly enough to stabilize the war zone, arrest the momentum of Ghazghkull's onslaught, and prevent the wholesale rout of Imperial forces. To do so, however, they would need to pool their resources. And so, Marneus Calgar called for a mustering at Vos Prime. Above the Forge World, disparate Space Marine chapters gathered their forces together in preparation to strike a hammer blow against the invaders. The rally soon drew together elements of more than a dozen chapters, some from Battlegroup Zexarian, others from less significant conflicts or nearby chapter planets. Within a few Terran weeks, Calgar had assembled a task force powerful enough to strike at Armageddon. The coming campaign of liberation would be known by the codename Operation Imperator. Armageddon. Once the industrial linchpin of the entire sector, the hive world of Armageddon now buckles beneath the weight of another Ork onslaught. For centuries, the center of industry has supported Imperial war efforts from the Segmentum Solar's neighbor sectors to the Ultima Segmentum's furthest reaches. Its people have endured grinding warfare beneath the burning glare of the system's star, the conflict pausing only when the beleaguered world's unstable orbit brings its mass lethally close to that blazing orb. Now, as months of fire give way to a season of shadow, war returns to Armageddon. Damaged or destroyed, though the majority of its industrial facilities may be, the Hive world remains essential to the Imperial war effort. Positioned at the nexus of a half-dozen warp routes and home to the sector fleet's primary base, St. Jowan's Dock, its loss would condemn many systems to certain doom and shatter Imperial morale across the Armageddon sector. However, the world's principal value is its reputation as a bastion of Imperial might. Now its highs burn, and Orks rampage through the wreckage, humanity's desperate grip upon that which remains, threatening to slip at any moment. The Orks are resurgent, born to Armageddon by means unknown, to renew their unending war. Ramshackle vehicles thunder along the Hive world's roadways, preying upon convoys and sweeping marching armies aside. Teeming alien hordes appear unbidden in crackling storms of green light, to run rampant over trench lines and through half-destroyed Hive districts. Above the din of battle, the invaders bellow a single name, a name known well to the Ordo Xenos, a name whispered in fear by the people of this war-scarred world. Ghazkhull. The records of the Ordo Xenos to which I remain privy designate the warlord as an extremis-level threat. It is a status well earned. Twice before, he has come to Armageddon, each time demonstrating a talent for tactics and strategy long thought beyond the wit of any Ork. I have hunted this species for decades, studied their movements, evaluated their battle tactics, and crossed blades with the largest and most belligerent of their number. And yet, in all my years, I have never encountered another quite like Grand Warlord Ghazkhull Mag Uruk Thrakka. Each war he has led, the beast of Armageddon appears to have learned. With each defeat, he has only been made stronger. Now, he goes on the offensive once more, and this time, his ambitions may not be limited to a single system. I have tracked his passage through the stars, followed his fell spore from shattered colony to smouldering warworld. The green tide swells throughout the sector, loosed by profane Xenos technology upon systems ill-prepared to meet its fury. Yet even as war embroils distant worlds, Armageddon remains the key. Here, Ghazghkull strikes hardest, for mighty though he may be, surely he seeks vengeance with the same zeal as any human, and will not rest until he has crushed this planet beneath his heel. Armageddon stands upon the precipice of oblivion. No more do the manufactorums of Hive Tartarus echo with industrial clangor and the furnaces roar. No more can the Adeptus Administratum's exacting tithes be raised from the planet's war-ridden hives. Now every iota of Armageddon's remaining strength must be turned only towards its own defense. Millions continue to be fed into the merciless machinery of warfare, their lives sacrificed simply to stem the green tide long enough for the increasingly desperate screams of Armageddon's astropaths to be heard. For now, the hives stand alone against the onslaught. The remaining defenders are resolute to make the aliens bleed and die for every inch of ground gained. To shrink from the fight would be worse than mere capitulation. It would be nothing short of heresy. To admit defeat would constitute a betrayal of the Imperium beyond forgiveness. And so, the people of the hives and the soldiers in their trenches offer their prayers to the Emperor and fight on. Inquisitor Croyle. Angels of Death. When Ghazghull's Great War slammed into the Armageddon subsector, Adeptus Astartes forces from dozens of chapters responded. Those already in the region and watchful for incursions hurled themselves immediately into the fight to protect Imperial worlds. Others heard Marneus Calgar's rallying cries, joining the muster at Vos Prime to pool their strengths and prepare for a coordinated campaign of vengeance and liberation. Many of the Space Marine forces that amassed at Vos Prime had been assigned to Battle Group Sexarian of Indomitus Crusade Fleet Sextus. Elements of the Black Dragons, Sons of Auror, Nova Marines, Silver Skulls, and Salamanders had all formed part of that Crusade fleet strength in the northern reaches of the Segmentum Solar. Others, notably the Marines Malevolent and Stormlords, were simply fortunate enough to intercept the rallying cries of the Ultramarines' astropaths. A few chapters, most notably the Space Wolves and Black Templars, had forces near Armageddon before the main thrust of Ghazghull's invasion struck home. High Marshal Helbrecht's Black Templars were already engaged throughout the subsector and contributed 2 fighting companies to the muster at Vos Prime. The Space Wolves, too, had been waging a decades-long campaign against Ghazghull's forces and were swift to pledge themselves to Calgar's cause. The number of warriors provided by each chapter varied greatly. The Ultramarines and Blood Angels could contribute only enough Battle Brothers to form a handful of strike forces. Other Space Marine forces, including the Crimson Fists, Black Guard, and Angels Eradicant, dispatched multiple companies of Battle Brothers alongside dozens of armored vehicles, walkers, and other heavy assets. An undertaking as huge as Operation Imperator, which comprised forces of many disparate chapters, required Calgar to appoint a cadre of skilled strategic commanders to oversee its implementation. These officers included such veterans as Chapter Master Tushan of the Salamanders, Brother Captain Sendini of the Blood Angels, and Captain Faradis Anto of the Crimson Fists. To coordinate the initial waves of assault, however, he turned to one of his own. Lieutenant Eothras of the Ultramarine 2nd Company would be his proxy, ensuring that Operation Imperator unfolded according to plan. Eothras would be given the brevet rank of Honor Captain, which gave him the authority to speak with his fellow commanders on an equal footing. It was to be Eothras' task to ensure that Calgar's well-laid plans were followed as closely as possible, and the initial landings on Armageddon met with success. Though the intelligence available to him had been scant, Calgar's plans for Operation Imperator were detailed and well laid. The Space Marine fleet would make haste to Armageddon, rallying at the system's western edge before proceeding at maximum thrust towards its heart. The fleet would take several days to reach Armageddon orbit, even at full speed. Provisions were made for a small task force led by the Black Templars to be split away from the primary fleet and relieve the crucial shipyards of St. John's Dock. However, the bulk of the fleet would drive hard to Armageddon orbit, engaging only those enemy vessels that moved to block its path. Adeptus Astartes' ground forces had been divided into 5 battle groups. Each of these companies would strike at the Orcs in one of Armageddon's key theaters of war. The planet's hives, factorums, promethium refineries, and other key infrastructure would be the foremost targets. Beyond these crucial objectives, Operation Imperator's commanders would be given free rein to wage war as they saw fit. Marneus Calgar. Few of the Imperium's military commanders possessed the combination of strategic genius and formidable charisma required to coordinate grand battle plans on the scale of Operation Imperator. Marneus Calgar is one such general, and it was fortunate indeed for the Imperium that he was present in the vicinity of Armageddon when the alien invasion crashed home. The chapter master of the Ultramarines was familiar with the planet, having led the Ultramarines' response to Ghazghkull's first invasion. This time, however, the onslaught encompassed a score or more systems. Calgar knew the fight for Armageddon would be the most crucial of all these wars. Should the hive world fall, the resultant blow to Imperial production, morale, and military prowess would be devastating. And so, at Vos Prime, he established a rallying point for all available Adeptus Astartes forces. Their task would be to break Ghazghkull's stranglehold on the world's hives, bring temporary relief to exhausted Astra Militarum regiments, and frustrate the Orcs long enough for greater might to be summoned and brought to bear. Blood Angels. Liberator Assault Group Sendini. The Blood Angels that responded to Marneus Calgar's call were amongst the first reinforcements to brave the arduous and lethal journey from the Imperium Nihilus to the Imperium Sanctus. Led by Captain Sendini of the 5th Company, they had been dispatched at Commander Dante's order to show the wider galaxy that Baal still stood and that the sons of Sanguinius had not forgotten their responsibilities. Though Captain Sendini had not been amongst the Blood Angels who served under Dante during Ghazghkull's first invasion of Armageddon, he was familiar with the battle record of his chapter master during that conflict. He swore to uphold Dante's legacy of bold leadership and heroic action. It was the Blood Angels' expertise in shock assaults and high-altitude planetary insertions, coupled with Sendini's extensive experience in such operations, that saw him elevated to the command echelons of Operation Imperator. In Sendini, Calgar saw the bold yet level-headed commander that the coming battle would require. Thus, when the Space Marine fleet emerged into orbit above Armageddon, Sendini's Liberator Assault Group led the first wave to descend towards High Volcanis and engage the invaders. Salamanders, Strike Force Tushan. Led by Chapter Master Tushan, 6 companies of the Salamanders were deployed to Armageddon. Some of these warriors had been seconded to Battle Group Isexarian before the outbreak of war, while others were rallied from distant war zones. They would be deployed across Armageddon in almost every theater of the war. Strike Force Tushan, consisting of warriors from the 1st and 2nd Companies, led Operation Imperator's relief of Hive Infernus. With the assistance of strike forces from the Stormlords and Subjugators, Tushan Salamanders would brave the massed force surrounding Hive Infernus, launching targeted strikes on the Xenos hordes crossing the Styges River, beginning a guerrilla campaign against the Orcs in the Diablo Mountains, and aiding Imperial forces seeking to recover the Infernus South Forge complex. The salamanders would find themselves particularly at home in the Diablo Mountains, for the catastrophic fighting that occurred during Angron's Season of Blood had resulted in rampant volcanic activity, turning the Diablo Mountains into a hellscape marred by rivers of lava and reminiscent of the salamanders' home planet, Nocturne. Crimson Fists. Strike Force Anto. There is no foe the Crimson Fist despise more than the Ork, so the chapter's battle companies needed no encouragement to storm to Armageddon's defense. Most of the 3rd Company, led by Captain Feradis Anto, had initially deployed to Pyrrhus, where they engaged the aliens in a series of bloody yet successful assaults, stabilizing the Imperial defense of that world. However, after hearing Calgar's call to arms, they swiftly withdrew to Vos Prime, joining elements of their chapter's 2nd and 4th Companies, as well as many reserves as part of Operation Imperator. Upon deploying to Armageddon's surface, Strike Force Anto formed a vital component of the reef of Hive Hellsreach, which the Orcs had almost completely overrun. Alongside similar-sized task forces from the Angels Eradicant and Stormlords, the Crimson Fist sought to secure the Ironside shipyards and Grendel's Lock, providing the beleaguered Hive with 2 support routes. With these logistical sites recaptured, they could press into the city and aid the citizens of Hellsreach, who still held out against the advancing hordes. They would be opposed by the war boss Torgok Dreknat, who had no intention of relinquishing his grasp upon either the docks or the Hive proper. Ultramarines, Gladius Strike Force Blades of Talasar. Though small by the standards of those contributed by other chapters, the Ultramarines contingent of Operation Imperator took a leading role in the planning and execution of the initial assault. Forming the core of the Ultramarines element was a strike force comprised of 1st and 2nd Company battle brothers, led by Honor Captain Eothras. Eothras's battle brothers joined Captain Sendini's Blood Angels in their assault upon the invaders at Volcanis. Their primary objective would be the partially overrun Kurov spaceport. They would then turn their attentions to the increasingly vulnerable Mannheim Gap. The Ork held Volcanis Archipelago and the eastern banks of the Eumenides River, where more Xenos continued to mass. The forces directed against Volcanis were formidable indeed. Their warlords led their hordes towards the Hive from multiple directions, and lumbering gargants, great convoys of tracked vehicles, and other dread monstrosities threatened to break through perimeter defenses at any moment. If Eothras were to stabilize the situation, he would have to rely not only upon the martial prowess of his warriors, but also his ability to coordinate with allied Space Marine forces and the battle-weary soldiers at whose side he now fought. Black Templars, Kayla's Vowsworn. Twice the Black Templars have come to Armageddon's aid, battling orcs, demons, and traitors alike in their endless quest to defend the God Emperor's domain and uphold the Imperial creed. High Marshal Helbrecht has never truly let go of his vendetta against Ghazkhull Mag Uruk Thrakka. Indeed, when the call to muster at Vos Prime was issued, Helbrecht's fighting companies were already present in the Armageddon subsector and at the forefront of attempts to counter the onslaught. To Armageddon, Helbrecht initially dispatched 3 fighting companies of a newly formed Armageddon Crusade. The largest was deployed near Hive Tartarus and led by Marshal Kayla. Though nominally under the command of Chapter Master Tushan, the Black Templars have demonstrated little willingness to coordinate with Imperial forces. Instead, they pursue their campaigns of vengeance and purgation against the invaders and demonstrate only contempt for the beleaguered human forces defending Armageddon, whose exhaustion and despair they see as spiritual weakness. White Scars, Strike Force Cofaster. Elements of the White Scars' 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th Brotherhoods formed Strike Force Cofaster, led by the 1st Captain, Subodain Khan. Formerly attached to Battle Group Xerian, they were amongst the initial Space Marines to be dispatched to Vos Prime by Marneus Calgar. They were subsequently some of the first to be deployed onto Armageddon's surface. Alongside strike forces from the Red Talons and Iron Hands, Strike Force Cofaster's task was to weaken the Ork hold over the plains of Anthrand. This massive expansion of ash wastes, toxic tar fields, and abandoned fortifications separated the Volcanis mountains from the equatorial jungle and had been overrun in the earlier stages of the invasion. Strike Force Ghazkhull met the aliens head-on. Subaden Khan led squads on powerful attack bikes in blistering counter-assaults across the open plains. These charges, supported by squadrons of swift land speeders, had the desired effect of confounding Ork operations. Operation Imperator, Order of Battle. The following is a list of chapters involved in the initial thrust of Operation Imperator, accompanied by an approximation of their strength and their attached naval assets. Angels Eradicant, 5 companies. Battle Barge, End of Days. Strike Cruisers, Righteous Justice and Finality. Angels of Fury, 4 companies. Battle Barge, Last Word. Strike Cruiser, Nox Vindictus, Gladius Frigates, Red Spear and Theton. Black Dragons, 4 companies. Strike Cruisers, Vehement Action, Stardrake, Even Flame and Obliterator. Black Guard, 6 companies. Strike Cruisers, Onyxus, Valiant Bulwark, Steel Talon, Pride of Arendi, and Shadow Warden. Black Templars, Armageddon Crusade, 3 fighting companies. Battle Barge, Sigismund's Fury, Vanguard-class light cruiser, Aquilan Eye. Blood Angels, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Blood of Vengeance. Celestial Lions, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Blade of the Seventh Sun. Nova Frigates, Nareth and Ibubessa. Crimson Fists, 4 companies. Battle Barge Insistence. Strike Cruiser, Crusader. Dark Krakens, 4 companies. Strike Cruisers, Eucharis and Fathom. Emperor's Spears, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Cursebane. Hawk Lords, 3 companies. Strike Cruisers, Gildan Raptor and Imperator's Talon. Imperial Harbingers, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Dawnspite. Iron Hands, 2 clan companies. Strike Cruisers, Solemn Silence and Crimson Hammer. Master of Portellus, 7 companies. Battle Barge, Emancipator. Strike Cruisers, Punisher, Perdition, Vitrifier and Virtuous Hatred. Marines Malevolent, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Merciless. Necropolis Hawks, 3 companies. Battle Barge, Death Talon. Nova Marines, 3 companies. Strike Cruisers, Corvus Honor, Ceaseless Vigilance and Spear of the Void. Penumbral Talons, 4 companies. Battle Barge, Midnight Hunter. Strike Cruiser, Chimeros. Raptors, 3 companies. Battle Barge, War Talon. Red Talons, 2 companies. Strike Cruisers, Claw of Justice and Holy of Execution. Salamanders, 6 companies. Battle Barges, Vulcan's Wrath and Pyre of Glory. Silver Skulls, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Spear of Destiny. Skull Bearers, 1 demi-company. Strike Cruiser, Osfuria. Sons of Gilliman, 4 companies. Strike Cruisers, Pacifier, Exculpator, and Sword of Presidia. Sons of Aurar, 1 company. Strike Cruiser, Condemnation. Space Wolves, 5 great companies. Battle Barge, Axe of Rus. Strike Cruiser, Old Fang. Storm Giants, 3 companies. Strike Cruisers, Herald of Redemption and Deliverer. Storm Lords, 3 brotherhoods. Battle Barge, Magnificat. Subjugators, 5 companies. Battle Barge, Rift Warder. Strike Cruisers, Xanaxian Justice and Watchmaster. Ultramarines, 2 demi-companies. Strike Cruiser, Internisio. White Scars, 3 brotherhoods. Strike Cruisers, Nomad, Silent Horseman and Lancer. Total, well over 9,000 Space Marines. The Orcish Hordes. Whilst his previous onslaught against Armageddon failed to bring Ghazkhull Thrakka the victory he desired, Defeat has done little to dampen the warlord's ambitions. Armageddon faces the culmination of his labours, the latest stage in a great war, decades in the planning. This time, however, Ghazghkull's plans of conquest extend far beyond the Armageddon system. The key to Ghazghkull's new onslaught upon Armageddon and its neighbouring systems was a titanic teleportation device known to its mech creators as the Mega Teleshocker. From its secret location in the Ork-held Golgotha system, this terrifying invention snatched the icy world of Chosin from the Armageddon system. To the stunned Imperial adepts and Adeptus Mechanicus astrologers observing, the sudden disappearance of an entire planet was as terrifying as it was inexplicable. However, before anyone could make sense of Chosin's disappearance, the invasion fleet appeared in orbit above the hive world. It unleashed Wazdaka's speed wars, the first stage of a renewed onslaught. These events were replicated across the Armageddon subsector, as a Mega Teleshocker hurled seemingly endless waves of invaders into unsuspecting Imperial systems. Of course, not all alien vessels reached their targets unharmed. Some were teleported into the hearts of stars, cast far across the galaxy, or torn apart by the Mega Teleshocker's own rampant energies. However, many more reached their destinations unscathed, to begin violent onslaughts that stretched the Armageddon subsector's defenses dangerously thin. The largest concentration of Ork power was directed at Armageddon itself. There Ghazkhull's flagship, Killwrecker, joined the armada of vessels teleported into Armageddon's orbit. So sudden was their appearance that the Navis Imperialis vessels stationed at St. John's Dock had little hope of halting, much less defeating, the massed fleet. The notorious speed freak warlord, Wazdaka Gutsmech, led the first wave of invaders onto the surface of Armageddon. His madcap speed war routed entire regiments, carved apart Imperial supply lines, and cut off hives from supply and reinforcement. The onslaught served to stir those orcs already present on the planet. Teeming hordes surged from hiding in mountains and jungles to join the fighting, drawn into the energy of the growing Great War. The plains of Unthrand rumbled with speed wars that stirred up towering clouds of poisonous ash. Commandos launched strikes on crucial infrastructure, paving the way for rampaging mobs of boys to overrun fortifications and butcher their garrisons. At High Volcanis, lumbering Gargants forced their way into the Mannheim Gap, running into a wall of titans and pre-prepared defenses and becoming bogged down in a war of attrition. At Hive Deathmire, Wazdak's speed war smashed its way into the city proper. Speeding columns of ramshackle orc armor drove deep into the hive's interior. Simultaneously, war boss Killcrumper's snakebite hordes pressed in from the south, catching the defenders in the jaws of a seemingly inescapable trap. Armageddon Prime bowed under the sheer weight of orc numbers. Having tasked those under him with seizing key sites across Armageddon's continents, Ghazkhull demonstrated remarkable patience in observing the unfolding conflict from the bridge of his flagship. Even when it became clear that his oldest foe, Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, led the defense of Hive Deathmire, Ghazkhull refused to be distracted by any personal desire for vengeance. Ghazkhull turned his attention to Armageddon Secundus instead. There his forces had pushed beleaguered Imperial defenders north towards Hive Infernus, slaughtering millions during their advance. Human defences were also overrun at Hive Tartarus and Hell's Reach, the orcs fighting their way into the interior of both cities. Only Hive Acheron remained inviolate, its defenders standing fast in the face of repeated assaults. It was there that Ghazkhull made his presence known. A rain of rocks and swarms of invasion craft descended from Killwrecker, who smashed down on the hive like the fists of Gork and Mork. As his troops rampaged through the lower hive, Ghazkhull led his bully boys in a teleport strike on the hive city's upper spires. He and his elite swiftly stormed the command center, slaughtered the theater command staff, and ended Acheron's resistance. With the fall of Acheron, Ghazkhull found himself on the brink of a victory that had eluded him for many frustrating decades. The Goths. Ghazkhull Bad Eye. The Orcs of the Goth clan are the biggest, meanest, and most unashamedly straightforward of their species, believing complex tactics and deception to be unnecessary mucking about. Goth war bosses prefer massed infantry and plenty of up-close fighting, confident in the ability of their lads to overcome the enemy through brawn and bloody-mindedness alone. Basic though they may sound, these tactics are frighteningly effective. Ghazkhull Bad Eye and his Basher Boys are amongst the most prominent of Goth-led warbands on Armageddon. They have devoted their efforts to tearing down Hive Volcanis' outer defences, storming the Volcanis Mountain Space Defence Fortress, putting several of its guns out of commission, and opening the way for a larger assault on the crucial Mannheim Gap, the only large pass through the Volcanis Mountains. As their allies hurled themselves into the Mannheim Gap in their millions, Ghazkhull and his lads began an offensive on the outer curtain wall of Hive Volcanis, working alongside Kill Captain Gullblitz's Blood Axe commandos to assault the vital Kurov spaceport. Ghazkhull's warriors were amongst the first to cross blades with the incoming Space Marine relief force. Evil Sons. Dorgok Can-Crumper. The first stage of Ghazkhull's assault on Armageddon was to hurl wave after wave of speed freaks into the ash wastes and continent-spanning roadways. Most bore the red and yellow markings of the Evil Sons, a clan whose members are maniacally obsessed with vehicular combat and booming firepower. The louder and faster, the better. One such orc was the war boss Dorgok Can-Crumper, who earned his reputation in the Octarius Wars before being drawn into Ghazghkull Thrakka's orbit. The mobs at his command, mostly comprised of Evil Sons, have found the plains of Anthrand much to their liking. The plains have proven to be an excellent hunting ground. Can-Crumper's Speedwar has barely stopped moving since it first landed on Armageddon, using boosted convoys of armoured and well-armed mega-tankers to supply its vehicles with fuel on the go. Can-Crumper himself goes to war atop a custom transporter bristling with weapons, which hauls his personal war buggies, bikes, and walkers to battle. Having already encircled and destroyed dozens of Astra Militarum companies and easily obliterated a number of ponderous tank squadrons, Can-Crumper is delighted to see the arrival of the Space Marines. These new foes may provide a sterner test for him and his speed-obsessed hordes. Death Skulls. Gorzog Scumlooter. The orcs of the Death Skulls clan have a poor reputation even amongst their own species. Light-fingered in the extreme, they are constantly on the lookout for valuable gubbins and will stop at nothing to get their grubby hands on that which takes their fancy. The Death Skulls are almost notable for their love of blue, believed by most orcs to be the luckiest of colours. After all, when engaging in as much deceit and thievery as the Death Skulls, even the smallest amount of luck goes a long way. Ghazkhull's hordes contain a number of Death Skull warbands, but none were as prominent as Gorzog Scumlooter's Nosh Grabbers. These thieving gits set their sights on the Infernus South Forge complex. This sprawling network of furnaces, factorums, and production lines contained a bounty of shiny mechanical components Scumlooter could barely wait to get his grubby hands on. The fact that an entire Krieg line corps stood between him and his prize did little to dampen the war boss's enthusiasm. Blasting their way through the Death Corps' defensive positions in a storm of fire, the Nosh Grabbers have seized several weapons factories and assembly lines. Their mech boys have set about repurposing these ill-gotten gains just in time to turn them against the waves of Space Marines descending upon Armageddon. Bad Moon. Torgok Drecknut. The orcs of the Bad Moons are obsessed with demonstrating their affluence in the most overwrought and ostentatious fashion. The biggest and baddest Bad Moon war bosses are so flush with wealth that they can purchase the swankiest and deadliest war machines and outfit their knobs with the best mega armor teeth can buy. Commercially minded big mechs are common amongst the ranks of the Bad Moons. These insane geniuses are only too willing to equip their allies with an array of experimental and outrageously destructive weapons, so long as the price is right. Torgok Drecknut leads the Moon Stompers, a warband almost entirely comprised of arrogant bad moons, loathed by the majority of their supposed allies. Tooled up with the snazziest weapons and war gear available on Armageddon, the Moon Stompers have obliterated the remnants of the Miasman 33rd at the Battle of Batraxian Barrier and smashed their way into Hive Hill's reach. Now, as the first elements of Operation Imperator crash down and engage Ork forces across Armageddon, Dreadnought enthusiastically readies his lads for the battles to come, knowing that the Space Marines will surely give them a fight to remember. Snakebites. Big Boss Urkfist. Committed traditionalists, Orks of the Snakebite clan favour low-tech weapons and war gear, eschewing anything they see as newfangled or overly fiddly, unless absolutely necessary. Large numbers of Snakebite Orks have managed to thrive in Armageddon's sweltering equatorial jungle, despite repeated attempts to burn them out. Big Boss Urkfist's Dreadfangs are a particularly feral group of Snakebites, who were engaged in a terrifying campaign of pyromaniacal carnage before Ghazghkull's arrival on Armageddon. In their ill-fated attempts to cleanse the alien stain from the equatorial jungle, Imperial authorities had begun a campaign of chemical and biological warfare against its flora, hoping to deny the Xenos their hiding place. Swathes of forest burned or wilted beneath an onslaught of anti-plant munitions. Far from exterminating the Orks, however, these actions were akin to kicking a hornet's nest. Urkfist, having already been spoiling for a fight, has enthusiastically hurled his boys into the fray. His forces contain an unusual number of weird boys and were-boys, whose bizarre psychic powers fill the smoke-clogged air with pounding drumbeat sounds and coruscating streams of green lightning. Blood Axes. Rogscar Red-Eye. Drawing inspiration from the toughest enemies he has faced, the Space Marines, the Blood Axe warboss Rogscar Red-Eye favours smaller units of elite warriors over the gigantic hordes fielded by his fellow commanders. His combined arms operations, loose interpretations of Space Marine assaults, often begin with a vanguard of commandos infiltrating enemy positions to sabotage, assassinate, and wreak havoc. These covert actions clear the path for Red-Eye's Meganobs, the Special Butcher Section, to teleport into the heart of the enemy formation and eliminate its command echelon in a brief burst of brutality. Red-Eye's warbands have been waging a campaign against the Valhallan Ice Warriors and Armageddon Steel Legion regiments deployed around the water filtration and pumping facilities of the Netheria Peninsula. Operating in close concert with the flyboys of the Snaz Squadron, they have already achieved many victories. Their most tremendous success was at the Battle of Eagle River, which saw them overrun the positions of the Valhallan 775th, slaughtering 3 companies of infantry and the regimental commander. Ork dispositions. The following are partial lists of the primary Ork forces operating in Armageddon's theatre of war. Volcanis Theatre. War Bad-Eye. Bad-Eye's Basher Boys. Massed Infantry. Hordes. Snickrot's Red Commandos. Infiltrator Mobs. Gutrock's Blitz Brigade. Vehicles, Aircraft and Artillery. Gork's Fury. Super Heavy War Effigies. Magrok's Ard Eds. Walkers. The Red Hands. Mechanized Infantry and Armoured Transports. Glitztooth's Darker Tide. Glitztooth Gunners, Elite Units, Preference for Ranged Combat. Urgit's Can Mob, Walkers, Gretchen Hordes. Warlord Grizzfang's Big Guns. Macro-Scale Artillery. Bostagrot's Blitz Brigade, Vehicles and Super Heavy Armour. Wazdakker's Speedbar. Wazdakker's Smog Rockets, Biker Mobs and Tracked Vehicles. Warlord Tufftooth's Gargant Mega Mob. Super Heavy War Effigies, Bloodroot Tank Crackers, Feral Cavalry and Infantry, the Nitro Knobs, Bikers, Tracked Vehicles and Buggies, Scarcops Burners, Mobile Infantry, Infernus Theatre, War Scum Looter, Warlord Scum Looters, Nosh Grabbers, Heavy Infantry and Looted Armour, the Iron Goths, Infantry and Walkers, Razgob's Dakar Squadrons, Aerial Assets, Warlord Gornok's Gargant Big Mob, super heavy war effigies, Thunderfoot Tribe, massed infantry and squig herds, War Dreadnought, the Moon Stompers, elite infantry, Warlord Grumsneck's Dread Mobs, walkers, Luxot's Big Mob, super heavy war effigies and walkers, Warlord Morbog's Mashers, mechanized infantry, Slugtooth Stompers, walkers and infantry, Equatorial Tribes, Dreadfang's Tribe, infantry and beast hordes, Flametongue Burners, Acheron Theatre, War Ghazkhull, Ghazghkull's War Horde, the combined force and largest concentration, Warlord Zugrag's Big Guns, mobile siege engines, Skull Stomper Bully Boys, elite heavy infantry, Godog's Boys, light infantry and vehicles, Bomber Command, heavy bomber squadrons, War Grimscar, Bloodscar Tribe, infantry, elite special infantry and artillery, Doomwalkers, super heavy war effigies, Squiggy Biter Boys, light infantry and feral mobs, Warlord Blitzgob's War Horde, anti-tank infantry and walkers, Scarblack Spine Splitters, combined force, Tough Cops Mechanics, vehicles, walkers and infantry, Fire Waste Theatre, War Gratlog, Gratlog's Masher Mobs, combined force, Firescar Tribe, combined force, largely infantry, Steelgut's Bone Grinders, walkers and Gretchen Hordes, Boss Cragfist's Gargant Mobs, super heavy war effigies, Dugrock's Diggers, unidentified technology, potentially borrowed vehicles, Bad Lung's Smog Lurkers, elite special infantry and aerial assets, Goresnake's Rippers, Zugrock's Squig Flingers, Beast Handlers and Squigs, One Lug's Tough Tracks, large vehicles and looted tanks, Deadlands Theatre, Netheria Peninsula, Warlord Red Eye's Commando Mobs, elite special infantry, Gargod's Humy Crumpers, walkers, Snaz Squadron, aircraft, many fighter bombers, Black Canyon Speed Freaks, bikers, vehicles and mechanized infantry, Icetooth Tribe, infantry, beast and Gretchen hordes. Operation Imperator. As Ork warfleets multiply across the Armageddon subsector, and world after world falls, Sector Command is inundated with astropathic distress calls. Marneus Calgar, the most experienced war leader in the Armageddon subsector, takes temporary command of the Imperial response, prioritizing the defense of key worlds. The largest invasion fleet appears in the Armageddon system, and alarmingly, within hours of first contact, the Hive world is designated as fallen. Marneus Calgar refuses to accept the Hive world's loss and, while simultaneously masterminding the coordinated response to the broader invasion, devotes a portion of his intellect to plotting the relief of Armageddon. So great is the psychic clamor from the Armageddon subsector that Imperial reinforcements are drawn from dozens of light years away. Battlegroup Zegzarian, belonging to Indomitus Crusade Fleet Sextus, is the foremost among these. Calgar divides Zegzarian's resources, deploying Adepta Sororitas and Astra Militarum assets to besieged planets such as Pyron and Basket. Space Marine forces, meanwhile, are directed to the mustering at Vos Prime. There, elements of a dozen or more chapters gather. They will form the spearhead of Calgar's planned relief of Armageddon, codenamed Operation Imperator. Other Space Marine forces are drawn to Vos Prime, foremost amongst them elements of the Black Templars and Space Wolves. These arrivals are incorporated into the planning of Operation Imperator. Little military intelligence escapes the blockade of the Armageddon system. Regardless, a list of priority objectives in the broader SAR system is drawn up. With targets assigned, crews briefed and battle brothers prepared, Operation Imperator's void ships plunge into the warp en route to Armageddon. The first elements of Operation Imperator emerge into reality on the westernmost edge of the Armageddon system. With most Ork vessels gathered in orbit around Armageddon and St. John's Dock, their arrival initially goes unnoticed. In the following hours, most of the ships that left Vos Prime have gathered at the system's edge. The formidable armada makes its way deeper into the system. Operation Imperator's first encounter with the invaders occurs near St. John's Dock. The Black Templars' battle barge, Sigismund's Fury, and the masters of Protelus's strike cruisers, Perdition and Virtuous Hatred, peel away from the armada and engage a small flotilla blockading the planet's shipyards. As the void battle rages, all three vessels deploy boarding forces against the Orks and onto the orbiting docks, seeking to purge the Xenos and recover the planet's crucial repair facilities. The remainder of the fleet continues towards Armageddon. As Adeptus Astartes' armada approaches Armageddon orbit, the scale of the invasion fleet becomes abundantly apparent. Fortunately for the vessels of Operation Imperator, the Xenos are absorbed by the battles below and slow to react. The cruisers Iron Tusk and Drakmor's Amma are obliterated. In return, the Blackguard strike cruiser Valiant Bulwark is struck amidships by munitions and broken in two. The listing portions of the vessel drift away, spilling corpses and chemicals into the void. The battle rages for hours, but the bulk of Operation Imperator's naval power eventually breaks the cordon and settles into low orbit. When the fleet establishes position, chronometers are synchronized and troops are deployed. The entry flare of drop pods and the contrails of Thunderhawk transports soon lights the skies of Armageddon. Operation Imperator is now truly underway. Captain Sendini of the Blood Angels leads the first wave of Space Marines in a drop pod assault against the mass Xenos forces besieging Hive Volcanis. Here the Orks under Osmog Badai and Kill Captain Gullblitz have already forced a breach in Hive Volcanis' outer curtain wall and are rampaging across the crucial Kurov spaceport. As Badai's Basher Boys smash their way through the thin line of Astra Militarum soldiers defending the position, the skies darken with Space Marine dropships and jump troops. The beleaguered defenders, led by Commissar Graves, rally at the sight of the Angels of Death and hurl themselves back into the fight. Now reinforced by the Salamander's Flameblade Strike Force, Agaton, and Demi-Company Ionis of the Marines Malevolent, Captain Eothras and Sindini exploit the momentum of their initial assault, hewing apart the stunned hordes and pushing their foes back towards the breach. The highly mobile Blood Angels of Liberator Assault Group Sendini launch repeated hit-and-fade attacks against the Xenos flanks, decimating mobs. With the alien advance beginning to falter, Captain Sendini and his veteran assault troops intercept Kill Captain Gullblitz's Nob bodyguards. Orks and Space Marines alike fall in the brutal engagement that ensues. The final blow is struck by Captain Sendini, who claims Gullblitz's head, breaking the cohesion and momentum of the assault. The Necropolis Hawks of Strike Force Gamma are inserted into the Volcanis Mountains by dropship, emerging under heavy fire to advance on the Ork-held Volcanis Mountain Space Defense Fortress. After 2 hours of fighting, the Space Marines breach the structure's walls. More than half of the remaining Necropolis Hawks are slain during the following pitiless combat, but their sacrifice results in recapturing the remaining gun batteries. However, with the defeated aliens regrouping to counterattack, the Pyrrhic victory may be short-lived. The Celestial Lions, under Lieutenant Nagadwe, undertake an assault of the western mouth of the Mannheim Gap. They swiftly engage and destroy the Ork tank hunters and pyromaniacs rampaging through gun batteries and bunker networks. With the weapons of the Volcanis Mountain Space Defense Fortress silenced by the Necropolis Hawks, Thunderhawks emblazoned with the iconography of the Angel's Eradicant sweep low through masses of spiraling rockets and booming flak fire to deposit repulsor and gladiator tanks into firing positions at the heart of the Imperial lines. The guns of these formidable vehicles, combined with repeated bombing runs, slow the Ork advance to a bloody crawl. Once more, the Mannheim Gap becomes a graveyard of twisted steel and blasted corpses, festering in Armageddon's stifling heat. With the Hive's southern flank temporarily secured, Captain Eothras and Sendini, Agaton of the Salamanders, and Umars of the Marines Malevolent turn their thoughts towards the next set of objectives. With Eothras' approval, Captain Agatone leads his salamanders south to relieve the Necropolis Hawks of Strike Force Gamma, who are now under repeated assault. Eothras and Sendini make for the Volcanis Bridge, the focus of concerted Ork pressure from the east. Captain Umars strikes west, pursuing Uzmog Bad Eyes mobs into the western foothills of the Volcanis Mountains. Captain Umars' Marines Malevolent catch up with the retreating aliens in the Volcanis Mountains overlooking the Mannheim Gap. It soon becomes clear that they have been lured into a trap. Squigs laden with bombs bound into the Space Marines' ranks, their detonations consuming dozens of battle brothers instantly. Amidst a storm of bolter fire and roars, Umaz cuts through the rampaging Orks to meet Bad Eye in single combat. The duel is swift and bloody, brought to a violent end when Bad Eye's power claw severs the Space Marine captain's leg at the knee. The battered Marines Malevolent are able to drag their wounded commander to safety, but are forced to retreat under sustained fire and repeated assaults. Captain Sendini's Blood Angels reach the Volcanis Mountains defense fortress and reinforce the remaining Necropolis Hawks. The fighting has reduced half of the structure to ruins by the time the Blood Angels plummet into the fray. So fierce and continual is the battle that ammunition caches soon run dry, and squads are reduced to using bolt rifle stocks and armored fists to bludgeon their foes to death. The day is saved when Chaplain Raffion descends, leading assault intercessors into the fight. With a skull-crunching blow from his Crozius Arcanum, Raffion slays the menacing brute bearing the tribe's banner and casts the alien standard down. Demoralized and broken by the unexpected strike, the Orks are driven back towards the mountain peaks, pursued swiftly and relentlessly by Chaplain Raffion and the remainder of his battle-hungry Blood Angels. End quote. And watch out for the second half dropping soon, and something I hope you will find very exciting next week. Something long requested, hard worked on, and finally come to fruition. A hint. It is not lore. It's far cooler than that. Oh yes it is. And of course, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.